Welcome back to our Reddit cheating stories. Where are you watching from? State in comment and thanks for tuning in. Let's dive in. Mark. Just the name sent a shiver of revulsion down my spine. My husband. My betrayer. He had walked out of our life, out of our home, and straight into the arms of my sister, Sarah. The details were a blur of disbelief and agony. Whispers, furtive glances, late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, all the classic signs, all the clichés. I had dismissed them, blinded by love, by the belief that Mark and I were an unbreakable team. How wrong I had been. He had been patient, methodical, a predator circling his prey. He'd subtly manipulated me, planting seeds of doubt about my ambitions, my friendships, even my family. He'd isolated me, subtly convincing me that he was the only one I could truly rely on. And then, when he had me exactly where he wanted me, he struck. He announced his affair with Sarah with the cold detachment of someone reading a grocery list. He didn't offer apologies, didn't acknowledge the years we'd spent together, the promises we'd made. He simply said he was no longer in love with me and that he'd found happiness with Sarah. Happiness. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. The divorce was swift and brutal. He took as much as he could, leaving me with a fraction of what we had built together. He claimed I was too emotional, too unstable, to handle our shared finances. The judge, swayed by Mark's carefully constructed narrative of my supposed incompetence, sided with him. And then, the ultimate betrayal, he married Sarah. The photographs from the wedding were splashed across social media, a constant, nauseating reminder of my humiliation. Mark, radiating smug satisfaction, his arm possessively around Sarah, who was beaming with a triumphant glee that chilled me to the bone. They looked like they'd won the lottery. And in a way, they thought they had. The whispers started almost immediately. He married her for the money, people murmured. Sarah's the real prize. It was true. My family was wealthy. My grandfather had built a business empire from nothing, and my father had expanded it exponentially. Sarah and I were the sole heirs to a vast fortune, a fortune that Mark, with his insatiable ambition and lack of scruples, desperately craved. He had calculated everything, meticulously planning his ascent to power and wealth. He'd seen Sarah as the easier target, the one less likely to question his motives. He'd underestimated me. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd gotten everything he wanted. He thought he'd broken me. But he was wrong. The months following the divorce were the darkest of my life. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of grief and betrayal. I lost weight, I couldn't sleep, and the simplest tasks felt insurmountable. I considered moving away, changing my name, disappearing altogether. But then, something shifted. A spark of defiance flickered within me. A refusal to be defined by their treachery. I started seeing a therapist, who helped me unpack the years of manipulation and emotional abuse I had endured. I reconnected with old friends, people who had always been there for me, but whom I had neglected during my marriage. I started taking care of myself, physically and emotionally. I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I enrolled in a business course, determined to prove Mark wrong about my supposed incompetence. I threw myself into my work at the Family Foundation, focusing on charitable causes that were meaningful to me. I rediscovered my passions, my hobbies, the things that made me, me. And then, my father died. He had been ill for some time, but his death still came as a shock. He was a strong, vibrant man, a force of nature. His absence left a void in my life that felt impossible to fill. The reading of the will was a somber affair. My mother, still reeling from the loss of her husband, sat beside me, her hand trembling in mine. Sarah and Mark sat opposite us, their faces etched with a mixture of grief and anticipation. The lawyer, a stern-faced woman in a tailored suit, began to read. The standard clauses were dispensed with quickly, the tension in the room building with each passing word. And then, she reached the pivotal point, the section detailing the distribution of my father's assets. To my beloved daughters, Eleanor and Sarah, she read, I leave the bulk of my estate to be divided equally between them, with the following exception. A collective intake of breath filled the room. Mark's eyes gleamed. Sarah's hand tightened around his. The lawyer continued, her voice unwavering. To my daughter, Eleanor, I bequeath sole ownership and control of Sterling Enterprises, including all its subsidiaries, assets, and intellectual property. Silence. A deafening, absolute silence. I stared at the lawyer, my mind struggling to process the words. Sterling Enterprises. The company my grandfather had founded, the company my father had built into a global powerhouse. The company Mark had so desperately wanted to control. It was mine. All mine. I glanced at Mark. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with disbelief and fury. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Sarah's triumphant smile had vanished, replaced by a look of stunned horror. The lawyer continued reading, detailing the other provisions of the will, but I barely heard her. My mind was racing, trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. My father had known. He had seen through Mark's charade. He had understood the true extent of his greed and ambition. And he had protected me, ensuring that Mark would never get his hands on the company. He had given me the ultimate weapon. The rest of the day was a blur of legal formalities and stunned silence. Mark and Sarah left immediately after the reading, their anger palpable. My mother embraced me, tears streaming down her face. He loved you so much, Eleanor, she whispered. He knew you were the only one who could truly protect his legacy. I spent the next few weeks immersed in the details of Sterling Enterprises. I met with the executives, the managers, the employees. I learned about the company's history, its operations, its challenges, and its opportunities. I discovered a hidden strength within myself, a confidence I never knew I possessed. I was a quick learner, a natural leader. I had a vision for the future of the company, a vision that was both innovative and sustainable. Mark tried to contact me, of course. He sent emails, left voicemails, even showed up at my office. He pleaded, he threatened, he tried to manipulate me once again. I ignored him. He had made his choice. He had betrayed me, he had broken my heart, and he had underestimated my resilience. Now, it was my turn. I called a meeting of the Sterling Enterprises Board of Directors. Mark, as Sarah's husband, had been granted a seat on the board, a consolation prize for his failed power grab. He sat at the table, his face pale and drawn, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He tried to appear confident, but I could see the fear lurking beneath the surface. I began the meeting with a brief overview of my vision for the company. I spoke with passion and conviction, outlining my plans for expansion, innovation, and sustainability. The board members listened intently, their expressions ranging from curiosity to admiration. They were impressed by my knowledge, my preparation, and my unwavering commitment to the company. And then, I turned to Mark. Mr. Thompson, I said, my voice cool and controlled. I have reviewed your performance as a member of this board, and I have concluded that you are not serving the best interests of Sterling Enterprises. His face flushed crimson. What are you talking about? He sputtered. I am talking about your conflict of interest, I replied. Your primary loyalty is to your wife, Sarah, who is a beneficiary of my father's estate. Your presence on this board is a clear attempt to influence the company's decisions for personal gain. That's ridiculous, he protested. I am acting in the best interests of the company. I don't believe you, I said, my voice unwavering. And I don't think anyone else here does either. I turned to the other board members. I am proposing a vote to remove Mr. Thompson from the board of directors, effective immediately. A murmur rippled through the room. The board members exchanged glances, weighing their options. One by one, they voted in favor of my proposal. The final vote was unanimous. Mark stared at me, his face contorted with rage. You haven't heard the last of this, he snarled. I doubt it, I said, my voice dismissive. But I suggest you leave now, before you embarrass yourself any further. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. I turned back to the board members, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over me. Thank you, I said. Now, let's get back to work. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. I implemented my plans for Sterling Enterprises, streamlining operations, investing in new technologies, and expanding into new markets. The company thrived under my leadership. Profits soared, employee morale improved, and the company's reputation as an innovator and a leader in its industry was solidified. Mark and Sarah, meanwhile, were spiraling. Their relationship, built on greed and deceit, began to crumble under the weight of their disappointment. They argued constantly, blaming each other for their failed scheme. Sarah, realizing that Mark had only married her for the money, grew increasingly resentful. Mark, realizing that he had lost everything, became bitter and withdrawn. Their marriage, once a symbol of their triumph, became a prison of their own making. One evening, I received a phone call from Sarah. Her voice was trembling, barely audible. "Eleanor," she sobbed, "I need your help." I hesitated for a moment, my heart hardening against the pain she had inflicted upon me. But then, I remembered the bond we had once shared, the years of sisterhood that had been shattered by betrayal. "What's wrong, Sarah?" I asked, my voice softening slightly. "Mark," she sobbed. He's gone." "Gone?" I asked, confused. "What do you mean, gone?" "He's left me," she cried. "He took all the money he could get his hands on and has run off with some woman he met online." I was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. A part of me felt a sense of satisfaction, a sense of justice served. But another part of me felt a pang of sadness for my sister, who had been used and discarded by the man she had so foolishly trusted. "Where are you, Sarah?" I asked. "I'm at home," she sobbed. "Alone?" "I'll be right there," I said. I drove to Sarah's house, my mind a jumble of emotions. I was angry, I was hurt, I was resentful. But I was also her sister, and she was in need. When I arrived, I found her curled up on the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Her face was swollen and blotchy, her hair disheveled. She looked like a broken doll. I sat down beside her and put my arm around her. She leaned into me, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor," she cried. "I'm so sorry for everything I did to you." I held her close, letting her cry. I didn't say anything. There were no words that could adequately express the pain and betrayal we had both endured. After a while, her sobs subsided. She pulled away from me, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice hoarse. "I've lost everything." "You haven't lost everything," I said, my voice firm. "You still have me." She looked at me, her eyes filled with disbelief. But after everything I've done." "I know," I said. "But you're still my sister, Sarah. And I'm not going to abandon you." I helped Sarah rebuild her life, just as I had rebuilt mine. I helped her find a new apartment, a new job, a new therapist. I supported her, encouraged her, and reminded her that she was worthy of love and happiness. It wasn't easy. There were many days when I wanted to give up, when I wanted to turn my back on her and walk away. But I knew that she needed me, and I refused to let her down. Slowly, gradually, Sarah began to heal. She started to forgive herself for her mistakes, and she started to build a new life, a life based on honesty, integrity, and compassion. Eventually, she found love again, with a kind, unassuming man who loved her for who she was, not for her money. As for me, I continued to lead Sterling Enterprises to new heights of success. I remained single, focusing on my work and my charitable endeavors. I never forgot the pain that Mark and Sarah had inflicted upon me. But I refused to let it define me. I had emerged from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had learned that true wealth is not measured in money, but in character, in integrity, and in the bonds of family. And I had learned that forgiveness, while difficult, is the only way to truly heal and move on. The diamond ring still sat on my finger, a reminder of the past. But now, it no longer felt like a symbol of pain and betrayal. It felt like a symbol of resilience, of strength, and of the enduring power of the human spirit. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still emerge. And that even after the most devastating betrayals, forgiveness and healing are possible. And sometimes, just sometimes, the greatest victories are the ones that come after the most profound losses. Cheaters never prosper, but our stories do. Subscribe for more savage revenge.